Why is it illegal in this state to peel a shrimp with a fork at a restaurant, yet perfectly normal to spend $10 billion on a train that still doesn't run? Welcome to 71 Dumbest Things from California, where we are exposing the wildest historical facts, like the time an entire lake vanished because a canal broke by accident, alongside absurd laws about nuclear bombs in small towns, and the myths you still believe, like thinking the state's own flag animal still exists here. We are proving which insane stories actually happened and which are just sunburnt lies, so hit that subscribe button before we reveal the truth. 1. California proudly stamped a grizzly bear onto its state flag as a symbol of raw power and wild dominance. The irony is that the same animal has been completely extinct within California since 1924. Hunters and ranchers spent decades shooting, trapping, and poisoning grizzlies until the last confirmed one vanished from the Sierra foothills. So today, every state trooper car license plate and government building proudly displays an animal that literally cannot be found anywhere in California anymore. It is essentially bragging about a creature the state itself helped wipe out completely, making the flag less a tribute and more a permanent monument to extinction. 2. In 1994, California voters overwhelmingly approved Proposition 187, a law designed to cut off undocumented immigrants from public schools, hospitals, and basically every government service imaginable. Supporters celebrated it as a bold fix, campaigning hard and winning big at the ballot box. Almost immediately, federal courts intervened, ruling the entire law unconstitutional and blocking it before it could ever fully take effect. Millions of votes, months of political fighting, and an entire statewide campaign essentially evaporated overnight because of one judge's decision. California had passed a sweeping law that never actually got to operate, proving that sometimes the loudest political victories collapse fastest once lawyers get involved. 3. Los Angeles once operated the largest streetcar network in the entire United States, with red trolley cars stretching across the region, carrying millions of riders every year. City planners and car companies decided the future belonged to freeways instead. So, over just a few decades, workers tore out nearly every mile of track and replaced it with concrete highways choked with traffic today. Commuters now sit for hours in gridlock on the very same routes those trolleys once covered in minutes. California basically destroyed a working transit system and rebuilt the exact same problem using cars instead of rails. 4. California decided it needed high-speed rail connecting its major cities, and voters approved billions of dollars to build it. Officials promised bullet trains zooming passengers between San Francisco and Los Angeles in just a few hours. Construction began and costs exploded past $10 billion, while deadlines quietly slipped year after year. Decades later, there is still no completed high-speed segment actually running anywhere in the state. Farmland got torn up, and small towns got disrupted for tracks that mostly lead to nowhere yet. California basically built an expensive monument to good intentions and terrible execution. 5. Death Valley earned its name honestly by becoming the hottest place ever reliably recorded on planet Earth. Temperatures there have soared past 130 degrees, turning the ground itself into something that can cook food without a stove. Tourists still drive out every summer just to snap photos next to the giant thermometer, proving they survived it. Rangers constantly warn visitors about the dangers, yet people keep showing up wearing flip-flops and carrying tiny water bottles. Cars have literally overheated and died in the parking lot before visitors even finish their selfie. California somehow turned a deadly furnace into a bucket list tourist attraction. 6. Owens Valley used to be a lush farming region with a full lake supporting local ranchers and their crops. Los Angeles needed water for its growing population, so officials quietly bought up water rights and built an aqueduct draining the entire valley dry. Farmers woke up one day to find their water gone and their land turning into desert dust. The dried lake bed became one of the largest sources of toxic dust pollution in the entire country. Locals still call it one of the greatest water heists in American history. Los Angeles got its water, and Owens Valley got left holding an empty toxic bowl. 7. San Francisco already faced total disaster when the massive 1906 earthquake shattered buildings and ignited fires across the city. Firefighters tried stopping the flames using dynamite to create fire breaks by blowing up buildings in the fire's path. Untrained crews badly misjudged the explosives and ended up igniting even more fires instead of stopping them. What started as an earthquake turned into a city practically demolishing itself, trying to save itself. Entire neighborhoods that survived the shaking were leveled by well-meaning explosions gone wrong. San Francisco basically proved that sometimes the cure can be dumber than the disease. 8. A wealthy widow named Sarah Winchester believed spirits told her that stopping construction on her mansion would bring her own death. So she kept builders working non-stop for 38 straight years, adding staircases that lead nowhere and doors that open into walls. Rooms multiplied endlessly, creating a maze so confusing that even staff reportedly got lost inside their own workplace. Neighbors watched hammering and sawing continue around the clock for decades without any final blueprint guiding the chaos. She finally died, and construction immediately stopped the very next day. California basically has a haunted mansion built entirely out of one woman's fear of silence. 9. California passed a 3 strikes law promising to lock away dangerous repeat criminals for life sentences without parole. Prosecutors soon started applying it to incredibly minor offenses, turning small mistakes into permanent prison sentences. People ended up serving decades behind bars for stealing things as small as a slice of pizza or a pair of socks. Prisons filled up rapidly with non-violent offenders serving sentences meant for serious violent criminals instead. Courts and taxpayers eventually had to grapple with the massive costs of housing people forever over minor theft. California basically built a legal system where stealing snacks could cost you the rest of your life. 10. Long before Silicon Valley became synonymous with billion-dollar startups, the region was actually known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. Endless fruit orchards covered the landscape, producing plums, apricots, and cherries that fed much of the country. Tech companies eventually moved in bulldozing orchards to build offices, campuses, and parking lots. Instead, what was once fragrant, blossoming farmland transformed into glass buildings filled with engineers chasing venture capital funding. Longtime residents still remember when the air smelled like fruit blossoms instead of burnt coffee and stress. California basically traded actual fruit trees for the tech industry's version of low-hanging fruit. 11. The iconic Hollywood sign did not start as a symbol of stardom and fame at all. It originally read Hollywoodland and was built purely as an advertisement for a real estate development trying to sell houses in the hills. Developers wanted eyes on their new neighborhood, so they built giant letters visible from miles away. Over time, the housing project faded from memory, but the sign stayed standing above the city. Eventually, the last 4 letters were removed, and Hollywood became shorthand for the entire entertainment industry. California basically turned a real estate billboard into the most famous sign in the world. 12. Sacramento suffered catastrophic destruction during the Great Flood of 1862 when water submerged entire streets and buildings across the city. Homes floated away and residents paddled boats down what used to be roads just days earlier. City leaders rebuilt Sacramento almost immediately directly on top of the exact same flood-prone basin. They raised streets and buildings slightly higher, but kept the city sitting in the same vulnerable location. Engineers have spent generations since building levees and pumps just to keep history from repeating itself. Sacramento basically got destroyed by a flood and responded by daring the water to try again. 13. A group of frustrated residents decided California had grown too large and complicated to be governed as a single state. In 2014, they launched a serious proposal to split California into 6 entirely separate states, each with its own government. The plan actually qualified for signature-gathering, meaning it had a real shot at reaching voters statewide. Maps circulated, showing new borders carving up the Coast Valley and mountains into distinct regions. Critics called it absurd, while supporters insisted the state was simply too big to function properly anymore. California basically had a legitimate breakup proposal filed against itself by its own residents. 14. California drivers already pay some of the highest gas taxes anywhere in the entire country every single time they fill up. Officials promised that money would go directly toward fixing and maintaining the state's roads and highways. Yet drivers still bounce through potholes and cracked pavement that seem to multiply every single year. Studies repeatedly rank California roads among the worst maintained in the nation, despite all that tax revenue collected. Frustrated residents joke that their cars need suspension repairs more often than their gas tanks need refilling. California basically found a way to charge premium prices for a bargain bin driving experience. 15. California modeled its state capitol dome directly after the United States Capitol building, hoping to project power and permanence. Construction began with grand ambitions, but funding problems and delays repeatedly stalled progress for years at a time. Workers would build for a while, then stop completely once money ran dry, leaving the building unfinished. Lawmakers argued over budgets while the half-built Capitol sat exposed to the elements for extended periods. Eventually, enough funding arrived to finish the dome decades after construction first began. California basically built a monument to democracy using the same slow, frustrating process democracy is famous for. 16. Ice Age mammoths once wandered through what is now the middle of Los Angeles, thousands of years before any freeways existed. Some of them wandered into sticky tar pits, mistaking the surface for solid ground, and became permanently trapped. Predators chasing those trapped animals often got stuck themselves, creating layers of fossils preserved for tens of thousands of years. Today, those same tar pits sit surrounded by museums, restaurants, and busy city traffic in one of the most urban areas imaginable. Visitors can literally watch tar still bubbling up from the ground on their lunch break. Los Angeles basically built a modern city directly on top of an ancient monster graveyard. 17. The small city of Chico decided at some point that local laws needed to address a very specific worst-case scenario. City officials passed an actual ordinance banning the detonation of nuclear weapons within city limits. Nobody has ever attempted to violate this law, and nuclear weapons were never remotely close to being a local threat. Yet the ordinance remains officially on the books today, just in case someone someday gets creative. Residents often laugh about it while visitors find it genuinely hard to believe when they first hear about it. Chico basically prepared for an apocalypse that was never going to happen there anyway. 18. Gold Rush-era California attracted immigrant miners from China and Latin America, hoping to strike it rich alongside everyone else. State lawmakers responded by passing the foreign miners tax, specifically targeting these immigrant workers with steep fees. Many miners simply could not afford the tax and were forced to abandon their claims entirely. Others faced harassment and violence on top of the financial burden, pushing them further out of the goldfields. The law effectively pushed out thousands of workers who had traveled incredibly far, chasing the same dream as everyone else. California basically welcomed the world to its gold rush, then taxed half of them straight back out. 19. California made history in 2016 by legalizing recreational marijuana for adults across the entire state. Excited residents assumed this meant lighting up freely, almost anywhere they pleased outdoors. Lawmakers quickly clarified that smoking remained banned in most public park beaches and outdoor spaces statewide. So legal weed sits in a strange gray zone where owning it is fine, but smoking it publicly can still get you fined. Confused tourists and even locals frequently get caught off guard by these restrictions. California basically legalized marijuana, then handed everyone a very confusing rulebook about where they could actually enjoy it. 20. San Francisco's cable cars have been hauling passengers up and down impossibly steep hills since the 1870s using nothing but cables and gravity. These clanging trolleys became such a beloved fixture that the entire system earned recognition as a national historic landmark. What makes this genuinely unusual is that it remains the only moving object anywhere in the country holding that specific landmark status. Everything else with that designation just sits still while cable cars keep rattling through daily traffic. Tourists line up for hours just to ride something officially recognized as a piece of living history. San Francisco basically turned its public transit into a certified national treasure. 21. Alcatraz Island sat in San Francisco Bay for years before the federal government purchased it for a fraction of what such a strategic location should have cost. Officials transformed it into an escape-proof federal prison, holding some of the most notorious criminals in American history. Guards and inmates alike dealt with freezing water currents and constant isolation just miles from the city lights. Eventually, the prison closed and the island sat abandoned for years before becoming a beloved national park. Millions of tourists now pay good money just to tour the same cells inmates once desperately tried escaping. Alcatraz basically went from bargain purchase to million-dollar tourist attraction. 22. Oil rigs off the coast of Santa Barbara ruptured in 1969, spilling massive amounts of crude oil across beaches and killing wildlife by the thousands. Outraged residents watched oil-soaked birds wash ashore while volunteers scrambled to clean beaches by hand. The disaster helped spark the modern environmental movement and inspired the very first Earth Day celebrations nationwide. Lawmakers promised stronger protections and stricter oversight of offshore drilling operations. Yet despite all that outrage, offshore drilling continued along the California coast for decades afterward. Santa Barbara basically sparked a national environmental awakening, while its own coastline kept getting drilled anyway. 23. Sutro Baths once housed the largest indoor public swimming pool complex anywhere in the world, right along the San Francisco coastline. Thousands of swimmers packed into massive glass-covered pools, filled with heated salt water pumped straight from the ocean. The attraction dazzled visitors for decades as one of the city's most impressive engineering marvels. In 1966, a massive fire tore through the structure, destroying it completely within hours. Owners never rebuilt it, and today only crumbling concrete ruins remain scattered along the cliffs. San Francisco basically lost one of its greatest attractions to flames and simply left the ashes for tourists to photograph. 24. California's Central Valley produces a massive share of the entire nation's fruits, vegetables, and nuts every single year. Farmers desperate for water during dry years began pumping groundwater from deep underground at an unsustainable pace. Decades of unchecked pumping caused the actual ground itself to sink several inches lower every single year. Roads, bridges, and canals have cracked and shifted as the land beneath them literally collapses downward. Scientists warn the valley may never fully recover from decades of invisible underground damage. California basically built its entire food supply on ground that keeps quietly sinking beneath it. 25. Engineers originally considered painting the Golden Gate Bridge a plain gray color to blend in with typical government construction standards. An architect instead pushed hard for a bold orange-red hue meant to complement the bridge's natural surroundings and improve visibility in fog. Officials nearly rejected the unusual color before finally agreeing to give it a try. That once controversial choice became known as International Orange and turned into one of the most recognizable colors in the world. Tourists now travel across the globe specifically to photograph that exact shade of orange. San Francisco basically almost painted its most famous landmark, boring gray, by mistake. 26. California's redwood forests once stretched for endless miles, containing some of the tallest and oldest living trees on the entire planet. Logging companies moved in aggressively during the industrial era, cutting down ancient trees faster than anyone could track. Entire groves that took thousands of years to grow disappeared within just a few decades of heavy logging. Conservationists eventually stepped in, but by then less than 5% of the original old-growth forest remained standing. Visitors today walk through small protected groves, imagining what once covered the entire region. California basically logged away most of nature's tallest monuments before realizing what it was losing. 27. The historic Hotel del Coronado near San Diego became famous for its stunning architecture and celebrity guests throughout the decades. In 1892, a young woman named Kate Morgan checked in alone and was later found dead under mysterious circumstances that were never fully explained. Rumors spread quickly, and her death became one of the hotel's most enduring and debated mysteries. Guests and historians have spent over a century arguing about what actually happened that fateful week. Some staff even claim her spirit still lingers within the hotel's historic halls today. The Hotel del Coronado basically turned an unsolved tragedy into part of its permanent charm. 28. California's prison system expanded so aggressively over the decades that facilities eventually held far more inmates than they were ever designed for. Overcrowding grew so severe that inmates were packed into gyms, hallways, and makeshift housing across the state. Conditions became so dangerous that federal courts eventually intervened directly in state prison operations. In 2011, judges ordered California to release tens of thousands of inmates early just to relieve the overwhelming overcrowding. Officials scrambled to figure out how to manage such a massive release safely. California basically built prisons so overstuffed that a federal court had to personally step in and let people out. 29. An Italian immigrant construction worker named Simon Rodia spent his evenings and weekends building towering sculptures using nothing but scrap metal, broken tiles, and seashells. He worked entirely alone for 33 years without formal blueprints, engineering degrees, or construction crews helping him. Neighbors watched curiously for decades as strange twisting towers slowly rose higher above his small residential lot. When finally finished, the Watts Tower stood as one of the most astonishing folk art structures in the country. Rodia eventually gave the property away and left California entirely without ever explaining his full vision. Los Angeles basically inherited an architectural masterpiece built by one stubborn dreamer with spare parts. 30. California decided to require solar panels on nearly every newly built home, hoping to push the state toward cleaner energy production. Builders complied by installing panels that generate plenty of electricity throughout sunny daytime hours across the state. Lawmakers never required matching battery storage systems that would let homeowners actually use that power after the sun goes down. So homes generate impressive amounts of solar energy all day, then quietly switch back to the regular power grid every night. Homeowners often feel confused paying for solar installations that barely reduce their evening electricity bills. California basically mandated solar power, then forgot to mandate a way to actually use it later. 31. Disneyland opened its gates for the very first time in 1955, promising families a magical brand new experience unlike anything before it. What actually happened turned into complete chaos as counterfeit tickets let far more guests inside than the park could handle. Asphalt still wet from that morning stuck to women's high heels, while a gas leak forced part of the park to shut down rides entirely. Restaurants ran out of food within hours, leaving thousands of hungry and frustrated visitors wandering around confused. Insiders who lived through it later nicknamed the entire disaster Black Sunday. Disneyland basically opened as the happiest place on Earth by way of one of the messiest launch days imaginable. 32. The California condor once soared freely across skies throughout much of the western United States for thousands of years. Hunting habitat loss and lead poisoning from ammunition pushed the massive birds toward complete extinction by the 1980s. Scientists eventually made the drastic decision to capture every single remaining condor and bring the population down to just 27 birds total. Conservationists then launched an intense captive breeding program, hoping to save the species from disappearing forever. Slowly and carefully, raised chicks were eventually released back into the wild over the following decades. California basically saved its largest bird by locking up every last one of them first. 33. Silicon Valley became famous worldwide for producing extraordinary wealth through tech companies and groundbreaking innovation. Yet housing costs in the surrounding region grew so extreme that even well-paid tech workers struggled to afford basic apartments nearby. Some employees eventually resorted to living inside vans parked directly in their own company's parking lots just to save money. Companies quietly tolerated the practice while workers showered at company gyms and cooked meals from their vehicles. News stories eventually exposed just how common this quiet housing crisis had become among supposedly well-paid employees. Silicon Valley basically built extraordinary wealth, while some of its own workers slept in company parking lots. 34. California lawmakers passed a sweeping law in 2017, declaring the entire state a sanctuary for undocumented immigrants living within its borders. The law specifically restricted local and state police from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement agencies in most circumstances. Supporters argued it protected vulnerable communities, while critics claimed it undermined federal immigration authority entirely. Federal officials pushed back hard, threatening lawsuits and funding cuts against the state over the policy. California stood firm, defending its right to set its own enforcement priorities within its own borders. California basically declared itself a legal buffer zone between its residents and federal immigration agents. 35. Engineers working on an irrigation canal near the Colorado River made a critical mistake back in 1905 that nobody anticipated. Water breached the canal and poured uncontrolled into a nearby desert basin for roughly 2 straight years before crews finally sealed the breach. What started as an engineering accident created an entirely new and massive body of water in the middle of the desert. The accidental lake became known as the Salton Sea and eventually attracted resorts, fishing tourism, and even celebrity visitors. Decades later, the lake became increasingly toxic and abandoned as water levels dropped and pollution built up. California basically created an entire sea by accident, then slowly let it rot. 36. Traveling circuses had featured wild animal acts across California for well over a century, entertaining generations of families. Animal rights advocates spent years arguing that forcing lions, tigers, and elephants to perform tricks constituted outright cruelty. In 2019, California finally passed a statewide law banning wild animal acts in circus performances entirely. Circus operators had to completely redesign their shows overnight, relying instead on human performers and elaborate stunts. Longtime circus fans mourned the end of an entertainment tradition stretching back generations. California basically ended a century-old form of entertainment with a single piece of legislation. 37. Los Angeles in the 1940s experienced smog so thick and toxic that visibility dropped dramatically across entire neighborhoods within hours. Panicked residents genuinely believed the city might be under some kind of chemical or gas attack, given how sudden and severe it appeared. Eyes burned, throats ached, and people struggled simply walking outside during the worst episodes. Officials eventually identified the cause as a toxic mixture of car exhaust and industrial pollution trapped by the region's unique geography. It took years of research and new regulations before the smog crisis meaningfully improved. Los Angeles basically choked on its own growth before anyone understood what was actually happening. 38. California generates an enormous share of its state budget from capital gains taxes paid by its wealthiest residents and top tech earners. When markets and tech stocks perform well, the state suddenly finds itself flush with unexpected extra revenue. When markets crash or a single bad tech year hits hard, state tax revenue can collapse dramatically overnight. Lawmakers then scramble to cut spending or find new funding sources to cover unexpected massive budget shortfalls. This volatile system leaves California's entire budget essentially riding the emotional roller coaster of Silicon Valley stock prices. California basically gambles its whole state budget on how tech billionaires are feeling that particular year. 39. Tensions between a sitting United States senator and a California Supreme Court justice grew so intense in 1859 that the dispute escalated into an actual duel. Senator David Broderick and Justice David Terry faced off with pistols according to the formal dueling customs still practiced at the time. Terry shot Broderick, who died from his injuries days later, shocking the entire political establishment. Public outrage over the killing of a sitting senator finally pushed California lawmakers to outlaw dueling entirely within the state. What started as a political rivalry ended with actual gunfire, and a state banning an entire practice because of it. California basically needed one senator's death before finally banning duels for good. 40. California built one of the largest and most respected public university systems in the entire country, attracting students from around the globe. Tuition costs stayed relatively affordable for decades, allowing working-class families reasonable access to higher education. Over the past 3 decades, tuition has risen dramatically, far outpacing overall inflation and average household income growth. Students increasingly graduate carrying massive debt despite attending public schools originally designed to remain widely affordable. Lawmakers and university officials continue debating how to control costs while maintaining educational quality. California basically built an affordable public university system, then slowly priced its own residents out of it. 41. Legendary musician Johnny Cash decided to record a live album inside Folsom Prison after learning something that genuinely surprised him. Inmates there had apparently never had a real concert performed live for them inside the prison walls before. Cash felt drawn to perform directly for prisoners, rather than just singing about them from the outside looking in. The resulting live recording captured raw cheers and reactions from inmates responding to lyrics about crime and punishment. That performance became one of the most iconic live albums in American music history. Folsom Prison basically became legendary because one famous singer decided prisoners deserved a real show too. 42. Thousands of desperate families fled the Dust Bowl during the 1930s, hoping California offered a fresh start and steady farm work. Los Angeles police responded by illegally setting up checkpoints right at state borders specifically to block poor migrants from entering. Officers turned away families based purely on how poor or unemployed they appeared upon arrival. This unauthorized border patrol operated for weeks, despite having no actual legal authority to block anyone from entering the state. News of the blockade eventually spread, nationally embarrassing California officials and forcing the operation to end. California basically ran an illegal border checkpoint against its own fellow American citizens fleeing disaster elsewhere. 43. Wildfires grew so frequent and destructive across California that private insurance companies started refusing to cover homes in high-risk areas entirely. Homeowners in fire-prone regions suddenly found themselves unable to get any insurance coverage, no matter how much they offered to pay. The state had to step in, creating a public insurance program specifically designed as an insurer of last resort. This backup system now covers homeowners that every private company has essentially given up insuring altogether. Critics worry the program itself faces enormous financial risk, given how frequently California wildfires now occur. California basically had to become its own emergency insurance company because private insurers ran away first. 44. California farms needed massive amounts of cheap labor throughout the 1950s to keep up with growing agricultural demand nationwide. The federal Bracero program brought millions of Mexican laborers into the state under official contracts, promising fair wages and decent housing. In reality, many workers faced brutal conditions, withheld wages, and severe mistreatment despite those official government guarantees. Farmers benefited enormously from the cheap labor, while workers often had little power to fight back against abuse. The program eventually ended amid mounting evidence of widespread exploitation across California farms. California basically imported an entire labor force under promises that frequently turned out to be empty. 45. San Francisco needed a massive new broadcast tower capable of transmitting television and radio signals across the entire Foggy Bay area. Engineers designed Sutro Tower as a towering red and white structure visible from nearly every neighborhood in the city. Residents immediately hated its industrial appearance, nicknaming it the Giant Erector Set due to its stark, angular design. Neighborhood groups protested loudly, hoping to block or redesign the tower before construction even finished. Over time, residents gradually accepted and even grew fond of the once despised structure. San Francisco basically built something everyone hated. At first, then quietly fell in love with anyway. 46. The old mining town of Bodie once boomed with thousands of residents chasing gold rush fortunes across the eastern Sierra Nevada. When the gold ran out, residents abandoned the town almost entirely, leaving buildings frozen exactly as they were left behind. California eventually preserved Bodie as an official state historic park, using a policy called arrested decay. Buildings get structurally stabilized to prevent collapse, but are never restored, repainted, or modernized in any way. Visitors today walk through stores and homes looking exactly as they did the day residents left decades ago. California basically preserved an entire ghost town by simply refusing to fix anything inside it. 47. Los Angeles. In 1871, experienced one of the largest mass lynchings in American history when a mob attacked the city's Chinatown district. Roughly 20 Chinese immigrants were killed by an enraged crowd following a chaotic shootout between rival factions. Authorities largely failed to protect victims or meaningfully prosecute those responsible for the massacre afterward. Despite the staggering death toll, this event remains barely mentioned in most mainstream American history education today. Historians have worked to bring more attention to the massacre in recent years. Los Angeles basically buried one of its darkest historical chapters for well over a century. 48. During the depths of the Great Depression, a California doctor proposed a bold plan promising elderly residents $30 in cash every single Thursday. Supporters nicknamed the movement Ham and Eggs after the simple breakfast that steady income could supposedly guarantee struggling seniors. The proposal actually gathered enough momentum to qualify for a real statewide ballot measure vote. Millions of desperate residents genuinely believed this scheme might solve their economic struggles during impossibly hard times. The measure ultimately failed narrowly at the ballot box, despite enormous public support behind it. California basically almost funded senior citizens' breakfast money through a wildly ambitious Depression-era ballot measure. 49. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the federal government ordered thousands of Japanese-American families forcibly removed from their homes along the West Coast. California's Manzanar Camp became one of the largest internment sites, holding over 10,000 Japanese Americans behind barbed wire during the entire war. Families lost homes, businesses, and years of their lives despite committing no crimes whatsoever. Conditions inside the camp were harsh, with extreme desert temperatures and cramped barracks housing entire families. Many former internees and their descendants continue sharing these stories to ensure history never repeats itself. California basically imprisoned thousands of its own citizens based purely on their ancestry during wartime panic. 50. California became a state so suddenly after the Mexican-American War that its very first constitution had to be written under intense pressure and confusion. Delegates debated and drafted the founding document in both English and Spanish, given the region's recent annexation from Mexico. Many residents still spoke primarily Spanish, while newly arriving Americans pushed hard for English to dominate official government business. The Compromise Constitution attempted to balance both languages and populations during an incredibly tense transitional period. California entered the United States as a fully formed state without ever officially existing as a territory first. California basically became a state so fast its own founding paperwork barely had time to pick one language. 51. California existed briefly as a contested territory caught between Mexican forces and American troops during the chaotic Mexican-American War. Fighting continued sporadically across Southern California, even after major battles elsewhere had already ended. The Cahuenga Agreement finally brought a formal end to hostilities within California, specifically ahead of the broader National Peace Treaty. Mexican and American commanders negotiated terms directly rather than waiting for distant officials to settle everything first. This regional agreement effectively ended California's brief and confusing period as an actively contested territory. California basically settled its own war locally before the rest of the country even finished fighting. 52. San Francisco's Barbary Coast District in the 1800s earned a reputation as one of the most lawless and dangerous neighborhoods in the entire country. Sailors desperately needed to fill crew positions resorted to drugging unsuspecting men in bars, then dragging their unconscious bodies straight onto departing ships. Victims would wake up far out at sea only to discover they had been forced into unwanted maritime labor. This practice became so common it earned its own nickname, referring directly to the distant port city of Shanghai. Local authorities largely tolerated the practice for years, despite obvious and repeated criminal behavior happening constantly. San Francisco basically let an entire neighborhood kidnap unsuspecting men and ship them away for profit. 53. California lawmakers grew increasingly hostile toward Japanese immigrant farmers who had become remarkably successful cultivating agricultural land across the state. In 1913, the state passed the Alien Land Law, specifically barring Japanese immigrants from legally owning any agricultural property whatsoever. Many families found creative workarounds registering land under their American-born children who held automatic citizenship. Officials repeatedly tried closing these legal loopholes through additional restrictive laws targeting immigrant landowners further. This discriminatory policy remained on the books for decades before finally being overturned entirely. California basically punished immigrant farmers specifically for becoming too successful at farming. 54. A group of pioneer families set out for California in 1846, hoping to reach fertile land before winter weather made travel impossible. Poor decisions and a disastrous shortcut left the Donner Party trapped by heavy snowfall high in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Trapped for months with dwindling food supplies, survivors eventually resorted to desperate measures just to stay alive until rescue arrived. Rescue parties finally reached the survivors months later, revealing the horrifying details of their prolonged ordeal. The tragedy became permanently etched into American history as a cautionary tale about frontier travel gone horribly wrong. California basically welcomed early pioneers with one of the most infamous survival horror stories in American history. 55. A carpenter named James Marshall was building a sawmill along a California river in 1848 when he noticed small glittering flakes in the water. That discovery at Sutter's Mill triggered the massive California gold rush, drawing hundreds of thousands of fortune seekers from around the entire world. Marshall's own land got overrun almost immediately by strangers digging everywhere, hoping to strike it rich themselves. Despite technically discovering the gold that changed California forever, Marshall never profited from his own historic find. He eventually died broke and largely forgotten while countless others built fortunes off his discovery. California basically owes its entire gold rush legacy to one broke carpenter who never cashed in himself. 56. American settlers living in Mexican-controlled California grew frustrated enough in 1846 to stage an armed uprising against local authorities. Rebels raised a hastily made flag featuring a grizzly bear and declared California an independent republic entirely separate from Mexico. This self-proclaimed Bear Flag Republic lasted only about 25 days before United States military forces arrived and took control instead. The short-lived rebellion never gained international recognition or lasting political power of any kind. Despite its brief existence, the bear flag design eventually became the basis for California's official state flag. California basically had an entire independent country that lasted less time than a typical vacation. 57. A jury acquitted police officers charged with beating Rodney King despite video footage showing the assault to the entire nation in 1992. Outraged residents across Los Angeles responded with widespread rioting, looting, and violence lasting 6 consecutive days. Entire city blocks burned while National Guard troops eventually deployed trying to restore order across the chaotic city. Damage estimates topped $1 billion, making it one of the costliest riots in American history at that point. The unrest forced national conversations about policing race and inequality that continued for years afterward. Los Angeles basically erupted after video evidence and jury verdicts failed to match in the public's eyes. 58. A powerful earthquake struck the San Francisco Bay Area in 1989 right during a nationally televised World Series baseball game. The Loma Prieta earthquake caused a section of a double-decker freeway to collapse, crushing vehicles trapped in evening rush hour traffic below. Rescue crews worked desperately pulling survivors from crushed vehicles while the entire structure remained dangerously unstable above them. Dozens of commuters died in that single collapse, making it one of the earthquake's deadliest individual incidents. The disaster eventually led to major changes in California's earthquake building codes and freeway design standards. California basically got a deadly reminder that double-decker freeways and earthquakes make a terrible combination. 59. Tensions between Mexican-American youths and American servicemen exploded across Los Angeles in 1943 during what became known as the Zoot Suit riots. Servicemen specifically targeted young men wearing flashy zoot suits, attacking them violently across multiple neighborhoods over more than a week. Police largely stood by or actively assisted attackers rather than protecting the young men being targeted. Newspapers at the time often blamed the victims themselves rather than the servicemen carrying out the attacks. The riots exposed deep racial tensions simmering beneath the surface of wartime American society. Los Angeles basically let servicemen attack its own residents over nothing more than their choice of clothing. 60. California property values were skyrocketing so fast in the 1970s that homeowners faced massive unexpected increases in their annual property tax bills. Frustrated voters overwhelmingly passed Proposition 13 in 1978, freezing property tax rates dramatically lower than they had been previously. This popular tax relief measure accidentally reshaped funding for public schools, which had relied heavily on property tax revenue for decades. School budgets suddenly shrank statewide, forcing California's education system to depend far more heavily on state government funding instead. Decades later, experts still debate whether the beloved tax relief measure permanently damaged public school funding overall. California basically solved one financial problem for homeowners while quietly creating a much bigger one for schools. 61. Newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst wanted his private California estate to feel like an authentic European castle rather than a typical American mansion. He purchased entire pieces of genuine European monasteries, churches, and historic buildings, then had them shipped piece by piece across the ocean. Workers carefully reassembled these ancient European fragments into his sprawling hilltop estate overlooking the California coastline. Guests touring Hearst Castle today walk through rooms containing centuries-old European craftsmanship transplanted directly into modern California. The estate remains one of the most extravagant private residences ever built in American history. Hearst basically bought pieces of actual European history just to decorate his California backyard. 62. San Francisco and the surrounding Bay Area lived under a growing sense of dread during the late 1960s as a mysterious killer taunted police and newspapers directly. The Zodiac Killer sent coded letters and cryptic ciphers claiming responsibility for multiple murders across Northern California. Investigators chased countless leads and suspects for decades, yet never definitively identified or captured the person responsible. Amateur code breakers and true crime enthusiasts continue analyzing the killer's ciphers, looking for hidden clues even today. Despite modern forensic technology, the case remains officially unsolved more than 50 years later. California basically has a real-life mystery villain that professional investigators still cannot fully crack. 63. An underground warehouse in Oakland had been illegally converted into a cramped living and performance space packed with flammable art installations and makeshift rooms. During a crowded electronic music concert in 2016, a fire broke out and spread rapidly through the maze-like structure. 36 people died trapped inside the building, which had never received proper safety permits or fire code inspections. Investigations afterward revealed the building had operated for years despite obvious and serious safety violations throughout. The tragedy sparked nationwide conversations about unpermitted venues and enforcement of basic safety regulations. Oakland basically lost 36 lives to a party space that should have never legally existed. 64. Tulare Lake once stretched across California's Central Valley as the largest freshwater lake anywhere west of the Mississippi River. Farmers gradually diverted the rivers feeding the lake, redirecting water toward irrigation for crops instead of letting it flow naturally. Over time, the massive lake shrank dramatically until it eventually disappeared entirely from the landscape completely. Former lakebed became some of the most productive farmland in the entire country, growing crops for the whole nation. Occasionally, after extremely wet winters, floodwaters briefly return, reclaiming small portions of the long-vanished lake. California basically erased an entire massive lake just to grow more almonds and cotton instead. 65. A man later known as Ishi walked out of the California wilderness in 1911, starving and completely alone, after decades of hiding from settlers. He was believed to be the last surviving member of the Yahi people, whose population had been devastated by violence and disease. Anthropologists at a university took him in, studying his language customs and survival skills extensively over several years. Ishi spent his remaining years sharing knowledge about his vanished culture with researchers eager to document everything before it disappeared forever. His story remains one of the most haunting examples of indigenous California history, largely erased by settlers. California basically let an entire culture vanish, then studied its last member like a museum exhibit. 66. Riders on horseback once raced across the American West, carrying urgent mail through the legendary Pony Express route, ending directly in Sacramento. This dramatic mail delivery system captured the public imagination, promising fast communication across dangerous, unsettled territory. Just 18 months after launching the Transcontinental Telegraph, made instant communication possible, making horseback mail delivery instantly obsolete. The Pony Express shut down permanently almost overnight, despite its legendary status in popular imagination and history books. Riders who had risked their lives crossing dangerous terrain suddenly found their entire profession completely unnecessary. California basically watched one of history's most romanticized jobs disappear practically overnight once technology caught up. 67. A wealthy landowner named Griffith J. Griffith donated a massive parcel of land to Los Angeles, specifically intending it to become a public park for everyone to enjoy. That generous donation eventually became Griffith Park, one of the largest urban parks in the entire country. Shortly afterward, Griffith shot his own wife during a drunken confrontation, though she miraculously survived the horrific attack. He was convicted and served time in prison, despite his prior reputation as a generous, civic-minded philanthropist. Los Angeles kept the donated park anyway, continuing to use and expand it for generations afterward. Los Angeles basically kept the gift while quietly ignoring the giver's attempted murder conviction. 68. California voters held a statewide referendum in 1911, deciding whether women should finally receive the legal right to vote in state elections. The measure passed, giving California women full voting rights nearly a full decade before the 19th Amendment guaranteed that right nationwide. This made California one of the earliest and most progressive states in the entire country regarding women's suffrage. Activists had campaigned for years, building support through rallies, petitions, and public speeches across the state. California's early decision helped build momentum for the eventual nationwide constitutional amendment years later. California basically gave women the vote a decade before the rest of the country finally caught up. 69. The Hetch Hetchy Valley once rivaled Yosemite itself, featuring stunning granite cliffs, waterfalls, and pristine wilderness, beloved by early conservationists. San Francisco needed a reliable water supply and pushed hard to dam the valley, creating a massive reservoir despite fierce, nationwide opposition. Famous conservationist John Muir fought desperately trying to protect the valley, arguing it deserved permanent protection just like Yosemite. Congress ultimately approved the dam anyway, and the valley was flooded completely in 1923, disappearing beneath rising water. Muir died shortly afterward, reportedly devastated by having lost this particular fight. California basically drowned a second Yosemite just to keep San Francisco's faucets running. 70. A charismatic preacher named Jim Jones built a religious movement in San Francisco, recruiting thousands of devoted followers throughout the 1970s. His organization eventually relocated to a remote jungle settlement in Guyana, known as Jonestown, seeking isolation from outside scrutiny. In 1978, Jones orchestrated a horrifying mass murder-suicide, killing over 900 followers, including many children. Investigators later traced much of the cult's original recruitment and financial support directly back to its San Francisco roots. The tragedy remains one of the deadliest cult-related events in modern American history. San Francisco basically incubated one of history's most devastating cults before it moved elsewhere to commit its final act. 71. An eccentric San Francisco resident named Joshua Norton declared himself Emperor of the United States sometime during the 1800s, despite having no actual political power whatsoever. Rather than mocking him, local merchants and residents played along, treating him as genuine local royalty throughout the city. Restaurants offered him free meals, theaters reserved him seating, and the city even printed his own currency accepted at local businesses. Norton issued official-sounding proclamations addressing everything from bridges to national politics as if his authority were completely legitimate. When he eventually died, thousands of mourners attended his funeral, treating his passing as an authentic loss. San Francisco basically crowned its own emperor, and everyone happily played along for decades. California managed to pack all 71 of these moments into just one state, proving that sometimes reality really is dumber than fiction. Which one of these facts genuinely shocked you the most? And which state should we expose next on this channel? Drop your answer in the comments below because we read every single one of them. If this video made you laugh, shake your head, or question everything you thought you knew about California, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell too, so you never miss the next batch of ridiculous history dropping on Dumbest Things.